There's a few things that I want to touch on this Sabbath. A few things that I have kind of refused to touch on in the past few weeks. I'll go ahead and get those out of the way now, and then we'll get to like the real lesson. As far as the beef, this is what everybody's talking about, is the beef between Drake and Kendrick, right? That's what everybody's been talking about. And this is something that I avoid talking about, or I have avoided talking about, because honestly I believe it's a distraction. Something to distract you from the real things going on right now. Like a rap beef is not very important. We'll see if it turns into something larger. There is something, the only reason why I'm talking about it now is because real allegations are being, reported, or at least even talked about in the songs, right? So I mean, I thought initially it was, and it still is this. It is still very much this of hatred and variance and things like that, contention. But Drake was accusing Kendrick in a song of domestic abuse, and Kendrick was accusing Drake of a whole lot of things, but specifically like pedophilic accusations. So we'll see if that gets exposed, which, to be in the entertainment industry, to be a worldwide superstar in this day and age, you have to do something. As far as they have to have something on you, they have to have a reason to push you. They have to know that you are not going to be one to turn on them and start spreading truth, right? They have to know that to put you on a worldwide stage. And if you are somebody who cannot be trusted in that manner, who they don't have some kind of dirt on, who they don't have some kind of blackmail on, they will not put you in that position. That's the whole deal with Epstein. All right, it's the whole deal with Diddy, compromising these, whether it be entertainers, whether it be politicians, whoever. Before they can get to that level, they have to be compromised. So both of them probably have something on them where they got to that level. And Drake has all sorts of things on him. Like it's been well known that he's a groomer for years and years now. Whether that he actually crossed that line and turned into what Kendrick said in what was that? Not Like Us. Whether he actually crossed that line, only God knows at this point. Maybe there's a few other people that know, but certainly God knows. But yeah, the reason why I never really touched on it again, because I figured it was a distraction. I still believe that it's a distraction from things that are really happening, and some of them things we're going to get into. But I wanted to touch on it, this right here in Galatians 5, just to summarize what's going on there. Galatians 5 and verse 19. Now the works of the flesh are manifest, which are these: adultery, fornication, uncleanness, lasciviousness, idolatry, witchcraft. There's some witchcraft going on in there, because even Kendrick said in his song Loyalty with Rihanna that it was a secret society. All we ask is trust, all we got is us, right? So the witchcraft there, hatred, variance, that's specifically what's happening in the beef, is hatred and variance, right? Kendrick said he's the biggest hater, right? Hatred and variance. Emulations, wrath, strife, that's exactly what a beef is. It's strife. All right. Seditions, heresies, envyings, murders, drunkenness, revelings, and such like. Obviously, I've been talking more about Kendrick here because I think everybody knows that Drake is about drunkenness and revelings and fornication and adultery, right? Like those are like typical rap things. But people look at Kendrick like he's, holy. But if not even if what Drake is saying is true, but the fact that Kendrick is in the spotlight the way that he is, and what he's even been saying in his songs is that he represents these works of the flesh that we're reading about here. All right, and such like, of the which I tell you before, as I have also told you in time past, that they which do such things shall not inherit the kingdom of God. Right. So people who sin, in other words, people who break God's laws, will not get His kingdom. That's just how it works. All right. But anyway, all praises to the Most High. That's about 5 minutes of, it was more than just rambling or stalling this week. So we'll see how things go. But we'll go ahead and get started, Again, all praises to the Most High that we made it another week. Not quite the Sabbath where I'm at, but, we're getting there. And Lord's will, by the end of this lesson, it will be the Sabbath. All right. So with that, we'll go ahead and get into it. I am kind of covering up what I got here. So I will, dang, come on. Come on now, I'll bring this back down to about right there. All right. So let's go to this article right here. First we'll update on the Israel-Gaza thing. Again, like I've always said, I didn't want this to turn into the Israel-Gaza show, but I just want to point out some things that happened this past week. All right, whether it be this past week or in weeks previous. This one was obviously today, but what I want to point out from this, it says, or at least the title of this article is, Hamas says Gaza ceasefire efforts are back at square one. And that's because Hamas had agreed to a ceasefire that third parties had implemented this past week. The state of Israel said, no, we don't want a ceasefire. We don't want things to stop. We want things to keep escalating. Like I've been covering, that's where they are at in this. That's the mentality behind what the state of Israel is doing. They want things to keep escalating. All right. The Palestinian militant group Hamas said on Friday that efforts to find a Gaza Strip truce a Gaza Strip truce deal were back at square one after Israel effectively spurned a plan from international mediators and the White House. And the White House said it was trying to keep the sides engaged, if only virtually. Right. So the White House, or rather America, Biden administration, is saying, look, we're trying to keep the peace, but the state of Israel is being, psychotic, being relentless. Hamas said in a statement it would consult with other Palestinian factions on its strategy for talks to halt 7 months of war triggered by its deadly October 7 attack on Israel. Hours earlier, the United Nations warned that aid for Gaza could grind to a halt in days after Israel seized control this week of the Rafah crossing between Gaza and Egypt, a vital route for supplies to the devastated Palestinian enclave, right? So the state of Israel has taken over all of Gaza at this point and has blocked all routes into the area so that nobody can come and help the people there. The children being affected by this, the families who are innocent being affected by this. Despite heavy U.S. pressure, Israel said it will proceed with an assault on the southern Gaza city of Rafah, where more than 1 million displaced people have sought refuge, and Israeli forces say Hamas militants are dug in. Right? That's what they've been saying. They've been saying, oh, Hamas is using human shields, so we've been shooting through those human shields. That's effectively what they've been saying and doing. Oh, Hamas is using human shields, so we're just killing all the humans there. That's basically what they've been doing. They've just been carpet bombing the region. They haven't been selectively targeting Hamas, who are hiding behind, human shields. They have been targeting all the humans there, all the people there. All right. Israeli tanks captured the main road dividing the eastern and western sections of Rafah, effectively encircling the eastern part of the city in an assault that has caused Washington to hold up delivery of some military aid. So even America said, that's too much war. We love war, but that's too much. All right. But let Trump get in office. He'll let him do whatever. All right. The White House said that it was watching with concern, but the Israeli operations appeared to be localized around the shuttered Rafah crossing and did not reflect a large-scale invasion. Right? So that was like, look, we're not invading, we're just surrounding and attacking. All right? Once again, we urge the Israelis to open up that crossing to humanitarian assistance immediately, said White House National Security spokesman John Kirby. Israel's plan for an all-out assault on Rafah has ignited one of the biggest rifts in generations with its main ally, right? So even America and the state of Israel are at odds about this, right? Washington held up a weapon shipment over fears of massive civilian casualties. They said, look, we're worried you're going to kill a bunch of civilians. Right? And if America is worried you're going to kill a bunch of civilians, you're killing a lot of civilians. All right? Think back to the Iraq War, which when America killed mostly civilians. Right? And it's because this idea of a war on terror is not real. It's the boogeyman. How can you fight an emotion? Like you can't. Or how can you fight an idea? You can't. All right. You just have to assume that you're shooting at the enemy. All right. And then that's what the state of Israel is doing. Actually, they're using, the idea of a war on terror to, just genocide all the people so they can take over the whole region, right? America was doing it was using the idea of the war on terror to take oil, right? But, even to America, like, oh, this is too far, right? In a report to Congress, President Joe Biden's administration on Friday said it was reasonable to assess that Israel had used U.S. arms in instances inconsistent with international humanitarian law, right? So the Biden administration said, look, they're breaking international laws here. Is that not what the the international, what is it? I think it's the ICJ, the International Court of Justice. When South Africa brought that case of genocide to them, they said, well, we wouldn't necessarily call it a genocide, but they're definitely breaking international laws. All right. Now even America is saying, look, this is too far. However, the administration said it still found credible and reliable Okay, I'm going to read this part again. However, the administration said it still found credible and reliable Israel's assurances that it will use the U.S. weapons in accordance with international humanitarian law. So this is the first time I'm reading this. I don't know if you could tell. I've read the first part of this, but I got to this. I got to about this paragraph right here, and I was like, yeah, I'm definitely going to bring this out in the lesson, but like. As I was reading this sentence, I was like, man, how it's either deceitful or naive. All right. Indirect diplomacy has failed to end a war that health authorities in Hamas-run Gaza say has killed almost 35,000 people since the October 7th attack. Some 1,200 people were killed in Israel and 253 taken hostage on October 7th, according to Israeli tallies. And we've spoken on those tallies before, how the numbers may be accurate, but saying Hamas killed all 1,200 people is pretty inaccurate there. Ceasefire talks in Cairo broke up on Thursday with no agreement. Hamas has said it agreed at the start of the week to a proposal by Qatari and Egyptian mediators that had previously been accepted by Israel. Israel said the Hamas proposal contained elements it cannot accept. You see that right there? So the state of Israel said, no, we can't agree to a ceasefire. We want to keep the war going. Israel's rejection of the mediators' proposal through the amendments it made returned things to the first square, Hamas said in Friday's statement. In the light of Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu's behavior and rejection of the mediators document and the attack on Rafah and the occupation of the crossing, the leadership of the movement will hold consultations with the brotherly leaders of the Palestinian factions to review our negotiation strategy. Right, because Netanyahu, he's acting like, oh yeah, we just want to find some kind of peace that we can agree to. He don't want peace. All right, he wants to obviously he just wants to stay in power. If you know anything about politics or anything political in the region, Netanyahu just wants to stay in power, and he feels like if he's in the middle of this war, then he could declare maybe even martial law and keep himself in office. All right. Hamas did not suspend nor withdraw from the negotiations. The occupation turned against the mediators' proposal. A senior Hamas official, Khalil al-Hayya, said in comments to Arabi TV published by Hamas. And obviously, I'm not going to sit here and say that Hamas is completely in the right. I'm not pro-Hamas, as I've been saying from the front, from the jump of all this, that there's evil on both sides. All right, it's just that the state of Israel has the power. Right, they have the power. They have the military might, and they have killed the most people, killed the most innocent people. All right, so there's no way that they are in the right. Kirby said the end of the talks, which CIA Director William Burns was helping mediate, was deeply regrettable, but the U.S. believed the differences were surmountable. So they didn't have to call off the discussion, right? We are working hard to keep both sides engaged in continuing the discussion, if only virtually, he said. So and he said, look, we'll keep talks open even if it's only online. All right, through emails or Zoom calls or whatever the case may be. Residents described almost constant explosions and gunfire east and northeast of Rafah on Friday, with intense fighting between Israeli forces and militants from Hamas and Islamic Jihad. Hamas said it ambushed Israeli tanks near a mosque in the east of the city. A sign the Israelis had penetrated several kilometers from the east to the outskirts of the built-up area. Israel has ordered civilians out of the eastern part of Rafah, forcing tens of thousands of people to seek shelter outside the city, previously the last refuge of more than 1 million who fled other parts of the enclave during the war. So where are they going to flee to? Where are they going to flee to? They say, hey, get out of the northern part of Gaza. So all the people run to the southern part of Gaza. They say, hey, get out of the southern part of Gaza. So all the people run to Rafah. Now they're saying get out of Rafah. So where are the people going to go to? I mean, they could run to the surrounding countries if they let them in, but that would be admitting that, you know, the Palestinians are giving up the land, and of course they don't want to do that. So they're in between a rock and a hard place, right? They're in between Egypt and the state of Israel. Obviously, they can't run north. Like, where are they going to go? Live in the rubble? No. And obviously Egypt won't let them in because of what I just said. So the people are just essentially gonna just either die or I mean that's really their only choice is to die or just run around like chickens with their head cut off. Like, that's their only options. All right. Israel has ordered civilians out of the so I just read that. Led to other parts of the enclave during the war. Israel says it cannot win the war without assaulting Rafah to root out thousands of Hamas fighters it believes are sheltering there. Okay. Hamas says it will fight to defend it, and you know, this is sticks and rocks versus machine guns, essentially. That's an over-exaggeration, but that's what it is. Hamas fighting against the state of Israel. All right, that's what it's like. Supplies were already running short, and aid operations could halt within days as fuel and food stocks get used up. So, you know, we're talking about the death of thousands more here, more than likely. All right. For 5 days, no fuel and virtually no humanitarian aid entered the Gaza Strip. And we are scraping the bottom of the barrel, said the UNICEF Senior Emergency Coordinator in the Gaza Strip, Hamish Young. Okay. Aid agencies say the battle has threatened hundreds of thousands of displaced civilians, right? So when we talk about the deaths of 35,000, that's not all the people affected. It's millions of people affected, or 1 million refugees who run through Gaza, right? Escaping this assault. All right. It is not safe. All of Rafah isn't safe as tank shells landed everywhere since yesterday. Abu Hassan, 50-year-old, a resident of Tel Al Sultan, west of Rafah, told Reuters via a chat app. I'm trying to leave, but I can't afford 2,000 shekels to buy a tent for my family. A tent is $540. That's crazy. He said there is an increased movement of people out of Rafah, even from the western areas, though they were not designated as red zones by the occupation. So, now, I don't know why I'm expecting the state of Israel to play fair here and you know, do what they said they were going to do. But, you know, they say, okay, we're only going to attack these areas, and then they attack everywhere else too. Israeli tanks have sealed off eastern Rafah from the south, capturing and shutting the only crossing between the enclave and Egypt, and advanced on Friday on the Salahuddin road that bisects the Gaza Strip, completed the encirclement of the red zone where they have ordered residents out. The Israeli military said its forces in eastern Rafah had located several tunnel shafts, and troops backed by an airstrike fought at close quarters with groups of Hamas fighters, killing several. It said Israeli jets had hit several sites from which rockets and mortar bombs had been fired toward Israel. The UN General Assembly overwhelmingly backed a Palestinian bid to become a full UN member by recognizing it as qualified to join and recommending the UN Security Council reconsider the matter favorably. And the UN is just a symbolic gesture. The UN can do nothing to stop any real military because they don't have military might. So, with all that being said, this is why God calls them the beast. This is why God calls them the devil. All right. I'm going to bring it out. I don't care. I'm going to bring it out right now. I'm going to bring it out right now. This is Revelation 2 and 9. Let's get it. Revelation 2 and 9. I know thy works in tribulation and poverty, but thou art rich. And I know the blasphemy of them which say they are Jews and are not, but are the synagogue of Satan. You see that right there? So them people that make the synagogues in the state of Israel, them people who, or rather build the synagogues, I should say. Those people who say they are Jews in the state of Israel are the devil. Christ said it himself. That's why they hate Christ. That's why they can't accept Christ. Because Christ called them out plainly. All right, as he was speaking to John here. He said, look, the devil, he's trying to warn the 7 churches. Look, I know the people who actually go through the tribulation. That's my people. But I know the people who say they are Jews, and they're the devil. That's what he said. Get mad if you want. That's what Revelation 2 and 9 says. All right. I'm going back to Ezekiel in the Old Testament, because it says something similar. Ezekiel 36 and 5. Ezekiel 36 and verse 5. It says, therefore, thus saith the Lord God, surely in the fire of my jealousy, have I spoken against the residue of the heathen, and against all Idumea, the Edomites, which have appointed my land in their possession. You see that right there? So that's Edomites. That's not Israelites. The Israelis are not Israelites. All right? They are Idumeans, Edomites, who appointed the land into their possession. With the joy of all their heart, with despiteful minds, to cast it out for a prey. That's what they're doing to the Palestinians now. They're casting them out for a prey. All right? And rest assured, there are some Israelites amongst them Palestinians. Hey, there's some Israelites amongst the Israelis. I'm not going to say that there are no Israelites in the land. All right? But the majority, like Netanyahu, like his war council, they're Edomites. They're the devil. All right? They're not God's people. All right? Let me just point that out. All right? I just wanted to point that out. So yeah, man, this is evil. This is wicked. I'm not gonna speak any more on it. Let's go. Let's update on the campus protests real quick, because that's gonna lead into the next story. All right. It says police were advised to avoid mass arrests. Then came the U.S. campus protests. All right. So let's read this one. This is an update on the protests. In the 3 tumultuous weeks since protests broke out at U.S. universities, police have descended on dozens of campuses to sweep up students in mass arrests, adhering to an approach many criminologists have found to be outdated and counterproductive. You see that right there? So people who study criminality for a living said, look, what these police is doing is not right. That's not how you're supposed to deal with protesters. All right. New York police arrested nearly 300 people at Columbia University and City College of New York on April 30th during protests over the war in Gaza, setting off flashbangs to stun and disorient demonstrators. 2 nights later in Los Angeles, police collared more than 200 people at UCLA. All right, so we talked about the April 30th, when that happened. All right, but then they did something similar at UCLA. At schools in Connecticut, Georgia, Texas, New Hampshire, and elsewhere, protesters have been arrested by the dozens. You see that right there? So the same thing that happened at Columbia that we talked about a few weeks back, they did the same thing, and all these other campuses as well, just came through and arrested people for no reason. They weren't being violent. They just wanted to shut them down. Experts on policing caution against drawing conclusions about police intervention, saying it is too soon. It is too soon to. I'm going to add a 2 there. It is too soon to determine where police may have acted precipitously precipitously, that research can take years. He said, oh, we don't know. We don't know why the police did it. It'll take years for us to figure out why they did it. Yeah, okay. But an early examination of the approach to campus protests suggests police, in many cases, have yet to shed outdated ways of handling large demonstrations, they said. They added that too many departments have been slow to fully realize lessons from the 2020 racial justice protests when police misconduct toward demonstrators where police misconduct towards demonstrators resulted in several multi-million-dollar legal settlements. All right. What we don't want is a large number of low-quality arrests. We want a small number of high-quality arrests. Why do you want arrests? Why do you want to arrest protesters? Why do you want to arrest protesters? All right. I thought this country was founded on the freedom of assembly. But again, you have rights until you don't. You have rights until they take them away. You have the freedom of speech until you say things that they don't want you to say. And then they'll take that freedom away. All right? Said Edward McGuire, a criminology professor at Arizona State University. Reuters based this report on interviews with 10 experts in criminology, policing, civil liberties, and law, in addition to reviewing recent research. So that's one thing I like about Reuters. They don't just publish something for no reason. They actually dig in to find answers. So that's why I like using them a lot. All right. Since the first mass arrest in Colombia on April 18th, at least 2,600 demonstrators have been detained at more than 100 protests in 39 states and Washington, D.C., according to The Appeal, a nonprofit news organization. The charges are mainly trespassing, with some for assault of a police officer. New York has also accused suspects of criminal mischief and burglary. All right. Some prosecutors are dismissing cases after police on horseback and clad in riot gear intervened at the University of Texas at Austin on April 25th. Travis County prosecutors dropped charges against 57 people, citing a lack of probable cause. You see that right there. So even in Texas, they said, look, and we've read stories here on how in Texas they'll arrest an 11-year-old child for doing nothing. All right. We read that on here before. All right, we've seen a story. I believe the young man's name was Timothy Brown. All right. I could be wrong about that. But the point is, even in Texas, they had to drop charges because they couldn't, find any evidence for why they arrested him in the first place. All right. So understand. Understand. This is I kind of want to speed through this, and I'll probably just leave it off there. It's not that long of an article, but I'll leave it there. Let me read the next two paragraphs, and I'll call it on this one, and we'll just get straight to the point of me reading this. Criminologists say many mass arrest cases are dismissed because police apply broad general statements, sometimes in identical language, to large numbers of suspects. Such arrests are also prone to sweeping up bystanders or people charged with minor offenses such as trespassing, right? So the police say, well, all these people were committing a crime, and there's no evidence to support that. They just wanted to make mass arrests, get the people out of there at that time so they could not be protesting. All right, that's just one of the tactics. All right, they can also be counterproductive by escalating tensions and generating animus toward police, providing protesters with a rallying cry that fuels even more animated protests, experts said. Right, so the police will just come through arresting people for no reason. Then the people who are left at the protest try to defend themselves, and now they're charged with assault on a police officer. Right. So that's how it works from time to time. All right. So why do I bring this out about the protests again this week? All right, because we already knew the police were arresting people for no reason, essentially. Why do I bring this out this week? Because remember what I first said when these Columbia protests popped off. I said they're going to use this to push some legislation saying you cannot say anything against the state of Israel. All right. And it just so happens that the House just passed a bill to expand the definition of anti-Semitism amid growing amid growing campus protests over Gaza war. All right. So, says the House passed legislation Wednesday that would establish a broader definition of anti-Semitism for the Department of Education to enforce anti-discrimination laws, the latest response from lawmakers to a nationwide student protest movement over the Israel-Hamas war. And again, it seems that, even this, I'm not going to say it was completely a sob, but there's something. There was always something more to these campus protests than what meets the eye, right? There was always something other, even if it's just in the spiritual world. There was always something more to these campus protests than just students are getting pissed off. There was always something more to it than that. All right. It says the proposal, which passed 3291 or 320, 320 to 91, with some bipartisan support, would codify the International Holocaust Remembrance Alliance's definition of anti-Semitism in Title VI of the Civil Rights Act of 1964, a federal anti-discrimination law that bars discrimination based on shared ancestry, ethnic characteristics, or national origin. It now goes to the Senate, where its fate is uncertain. All right, so we'll get back to the Senate part a little later, but I want to get into this definition of anti-Semitism by the IHRA. All right, because the House already passed this. It was Democrats and Republicans who got together on this and said, yeah, we're going to pass this bill. So let's open this up. Because it's the working definition of anti-Semitism, meaning they could change it at any time. Keep that in mind. But this is anti-Semitism, all right? Contemporary examples of anti-Semitism in public life, the media, schools, the workplace, and in the religious sphere could, taking into account the overall context, include but are not limited to. So remember, this is the definition that they're going to use if this bill passes, that they are going to use in conjunction with Title VI of the Civil Rights Act to make sure people let's check out Title VI of the Civil Rights Act real quick, just so we can see what that's about. Advised that no person in the United States shall, on the ground of race, color, or national origin, be excluded from participation in, or be denied the benefits of, or be subjected to discrimination under any program or activity receiving federal financial assistance, right? So, you lose federal protections, right? Whether that be funding or tax exempt status or anything like that. But I'll just get into the anti-Semitism definition and we'll get back to why that is important. All right. So these are examples of anti-Semitism, right? According to the IHRA. Calling for or aiding or justifying the killing or harming of Jews in the name of a racial ideology or an extremist view of religion. So that's understandable, right? You can't say, I'm going to kill Jewish people. You can't say that. Making mendacious, dehumanizing, demonizing, or stereotypical allegations about Jews as such, or the power of Jews as collective, such as, especially but not exclusively, the myth about a world Jewish conspiracy, or of Jews controlling the media, economy, government, or other societal institutions, right? So this one is actually, let's look at mendacious, because I never used the word mendacious, all right? So let's check that out. Mendacious. Not telling the truth or lying, right? So making lying, dehumanizing, demonizing, or stereotypical allegations. So it's not just lying, it could be truthful. If it's dehumanizing, demonizing, or stereotypical, then you can't do that. That's anti-Semitism, right? But anyway, of the Jews controlling the media, who started Hollywood? It's truthful to say that Jewish people started Hollywood. That's truthful. But it could be illegal, all right, to say that. Accusing Jews as a people of being responsible for real or imagined wrongdoing committed by a single Jewish person or group, or even for acts committed by non-Jews, right? So accusing the whole Jewish population for what, one or a few individuals may have done. That's not right. So I will go ahead and say that that's not right. Denying the fact, scope, mechanisms, or intentionality of the genocide of the Jewish people at the hands of the Nazi Party and its supporters and accomplices during World War II, the Holocaust, denying the Holocaust, right, essentially, saying that, they didn't suffer persecution in World War II. Accusing the Jews as a people or Israel as a state of inventing or exaggerating the Holocaust. So that's essentially the same point. Right, denying that the Holocaust happened and saying that Jewish people invented it as a ruse is pretty much the same thing, right? Accusing Jewish citizens of being more loyal to Israel or to the alleged priorities of Jews worldwide than to the interests of their own nations, right? So saying that Jewish people within your country are more supportive of the state of Israel than the country that they are living in, which may be true in some cases, but you can't say it regardless. This is the one that I wanted to get to. This is the one I wanted to get to. Denying the Jewish people their right to self-determination, e.g. by claiming that the existence of a state of Israel is a racist endeavor. You see that right there? When literally it's a Jewish state. That is a racist endeavor. If you're trying to remove all the Palestinians, if you're taking the homes from the Palestinians, that is a racist endeavor. All right, but you can't say that. That's anti-Semitism. All right. By the way, they are not the descendants of the biblical Israelites. They're the descendants of converts to Judaism in the Middle Ages. They have no right to the state of Israel. All right. So you can't say that, though. That's anti-Semitism. All right. Even though it's truth, they don't care. They don't care. They're trying to pass laws they're trying to pass laws to prevent you from speaking the truth. That's the point. All right. Because it's not for their agenda. All right. By there, I mean, not only Jewish people, I mean, America. I mean, the Confederacy. And we're going to get to that. We're going to get to that later. All right. Applying double standards by requiring of it a behavior not expected or demanded of any other democratic nation. Right. So that's specifically about the state of Israel and expecting it to be different than other nations, which is kind of weird. Weird phrasing at the very least. Using the symbols and images associated with classic anti-Semitism, e.g., claims of Jews killing Jesus or blood libel to characterize Israel or Israelis, right? So this may be like something that Nazis do, but it was Christ's own people who killed him. It was black people who killed Christ, all right? Black people ran to the white people, ran to the Romans and said, hey, look, kill this man. He's speaking the truth against us. We don't want to hear it no more. And even Pontius Pilate, the white guy, he said, look, I don't find no problem with this guy. He ain't done nothing wrong. And they're like, we don't care, kill him. So it wasn't even Jewish people who killed Christ. Now, Herod, he was an Edomite who converted to Judaism, and he tried to kill Christ as a baby, but he wasn't successful, all right? Ultimately, it was Christ's own people who killed him, all right? So it wasn't even the Jewish people who killed him. Wasn't even the Jewish people who killed him. It was the real Jews, all right? But anyway, drawing comparisons of contemporary Israeli policy to that of the Nazis. You see that right there? They said, look, you can't compare our genocide to their genocide. That's what it's saying here. It's two different things. You can't say that we're, genociding the Palestinians when they are. That's what they're doing. That's what they've done since they got there. They wanted to wipe out all the Palestinians and replace them with Jewish people. All right. They wanted to part the land, but eventually they parted the land, but eventually they wanted to usurp. And that's what they're doing in Gaza now. All right. Holding Jews collectively responsible for actions of the state of Israel. And I've seen people, this is why a lot of people on the left don't like this bill using the IHRA's definition of anti-Semitism, because they contradict themselves in these last 2 points. All right. Saying holding the Jews collectively responsible for the actions of the state of Israel, and saying being critical of the state of Israel That's contradictory. All right. You're saying that being critical of the state of Israel makes you anti-Semitic, when people who are critical of the state of Israel aren't necessarily anti-Jewish. All right. They may just be anti the state of Israel. It's possible to be those two separate things. All right. And I'm obviously very critical of the state of Israel. I criticize the state of Israel like every week on here now, just because they do so much wickedness. They do so much wickedness over there. They have been for a while, but it's escalating. All right. So I'm very critical of the state of Israel. And I mean very critical of Jewish people, right? That doesn't go for every individual, but that goes for a general assumption, or rather a general collective of what their history is. And it's not even being critical of them as a race of people. God said he's going to judge them, just like God said he's going to judge every nation. He's got specific judgments in store for every nation, every race of people. But I've just been bringing out the facts and the history of all the races of people, honestly. Maybe there's some that I haven't got to yet because they haven't made big waves like others. But yeah, you can't do that though. It's anti-Semitism. So this is the definition that got passed into law. And if this bill passes, goes through the Senate and passes, right? Because it's got to go through the Senate, and the Senate likes shutting bills down, so they may shut down this one too. They don't like passing laws; they like shutting them down, so they may shut down this one too. But the point is, even if they pass this, it wouldn't make it illegal to say things that were against the IHRA's definitions, but it would be illegal for anybody who gets government assistance to speak against the IHRA, right? And the thing about legislation is that it's not done in a vacuum. What do I mean by that? I mean that one bill passes, makes way, or rather makes a route for another bill to pass. All right? And one legal case will make precedent for another legal case. It's called precedent. So if this passes, they could then later make a bill that says, being anti-Semitic according to this definition makes, or rather, could get you jail time or whatever the case may be, and then that could make waves for any other kind of precedent to pass limiting the freedom of speech, right? And they again, you have rights in this country until you don't. You have rights until they take them away from you. All right. Anybody who was non-white did not have freedom of speech until like 64, right here with the Civil Rights Act, right? If you were speaking such or anything in a place that you were not supposed to, they would come and either lynch you or throw you in jail or kick you out, or you know what I'm saying? So that's where we're at now. They're trying to restrict free speech again. So understand this. That's where it's leading to. All right. It's not. Things are not going to get better until they get way worse. All right. So understand this. I'm gonna read this here in Matthew 24. Christ talked about what was happening from his time unto his return. That's what he's talking about in Matthew 24. So in Matthew 24, I'm gonna start with verse 8. He says, I'm gonna start with 7, because this is what we see now. It says, "For nation shall rise against nation, and kingdom against kingdom, and there shall be famines and pestilences and earthquakes in diverse places." There's a new earthquake like every day now. All right. Not all of them are bad, as in some are just small ones. Others are very powerful, right? But there are earthquakes in diverse places. That's how we know we're in the end times. He said, all these are the beginning of sorrows. Understand. Verse 9. "Then shall they deliver you up to be afflicted, and shall kill you, and you shall be hated of all nations for my name's sake." All right. So understand. This happened to Christ's apostles. Why would it not happen to us today if we follow their example? It is. And I'm talking about, freedom of speech being more restricted here in America. But you go to somewhere like Saudi Arabia and you try to preach this truth, try to preach against Islam, preach against Allah, then they will kill you. If you go to China and you talk about the wickedness of China, then they will kill you. All right? So it's already like that if you're trying to be a prophet to all nations, if you're trying to go to all nations, even places over here in the West like Cuba, they won't let you speak freely, right? So it just depends on where you're at. But here in the U.S., it's going to get worse before it gets better. Understand? Babylon will not remain forever, and Babylon will not let the prophets remain forever. Understand that. All right? If you're really trying to do what God said to do, the devil is mad at you and will try to invent ways to come against you. All right? Understand that. So this is Revelation 12. Check this out. Revelation 12 and verse 17. It says, "And the dragon was wroth with the woman, and went to make war with the remnant of her seed." That's the Israelites. The dragon here is the Edomites in power. The Edomites in power worship the devil. All right? That's how they got the power that they got here in America. And that's what I was explaining with Kendrick and Drake beef. If you're trying to be big in the world now, big in the world that America rules, you got to be down with the devil. All right? The dragon was wroth with the woman being the children of Israel. The daughter of Zion is likened to a comely and delicate woman, and went to make war with the remnant of her seed, right? Because that's how you know this is symbolic, not talking about a real woman. Women don't have seed. Men have seed. The seed is the sperm. That is the seed of men, all right? So when it says her seed, it's talking about the children of Israel's seed, which keep the commandments of God and have the testimony of Jesus Christ. So that's the ones that the dragon's really mad at. All right, the dragon don't give a damn about people in the world who celebrate Christmas and Easter. That's what the dragon wants you to do. All right, he wants you to celebrate the pagan holidays. The dragon's wroth with the people who keep the Passover, who keep Hanukkah, who keep the Sabbath day, who wear the fringes. Mad at the people who talking about the real Israelites are the ones scattered throughout the world who are oppressed by slavery and colonialism, right? The so-called blacks, Latinos, and American Indians here in the West. That's the ones who the dragon is mad at. The people who keep the commandments of God and have the testimony of Jesus Christ, right? Jesus Christ was a black man with white woolly hair who died for his people. That's the ones that the dragon is really mad at. The people who preach the truth, according to the scriptures, all right? So, from there, and we almost out of time, but I want to touch on this one last story before we go, all right? Make sure everything's still running well. It seems to be. Where are we at? We all right. Praise the Most High. So, let's get to it. This one right here. It says, School Board of Virginia votes to restore Confederate names. All right. That's important. And I was going to look up the whole edict of the Confederacy, but you should know that by now. The vice president of the Confederate States of America, quote unquote, for the 4 years that they were around, said that the whole founding of the Confederacy was to establish white supremacy, was to establish that black people were lesser than whites and should remain in slavery. That's the whole point of the Confederacy. If you say it's not, you're a liar or you're just dumb. All right, I'm telling you straight. I'm not going to pussyfoot around on this. I'm not just going to tiptoe around it, try to be nice. I know down here in the South, people love their stars and bars. And, it's taken up a life of its own to represent Southern pride. But that's what it goes back to. It goes back to, trying to establish slavery forever. That's what it goes back to. All right. It says, the Education Board for rural Virginia County voted early on Friday to restore the names of Confederate generals stripped from 2 schools in 2020, making the mostly white Republican district the first in the U.S. to take such an action. Notice how they worded this. They said the first, as in other places may be thinking about doing this. All right. It says by a 5-1 vote, the Shenandoah County Board overturned its 2020 decision that stripped a public high school and elementary school of their original names, honoring 3 military leaders of the pro-slavery South in the Civil War. Obviously, we know that the South was pro-slavery. Under the board's action, Mountain View High School will again become known as Stonewall Jackson High, while Honey Run Elementary School will revert to the name Ashby Lee Elementary. All right. So, and it goes on to say here, the names belong to some of the most well-known military leaders of the Confederacy. Robert E. Lee was commander of the Army of Northern Virginia. Thomas Jonathan Stonewall Jackson was a Confederate infantry general, and Turner Ashby was a rebel cavalry commander. All of them were Virginians, right? So I guarantee their justification is like, oh, we're just honoring the history of Virginia, right? By naming a elementary school after two Confederate generals, Ashby Lee Elementary, right, and Stonewall Jackson High School. All right. Any funds required to implement the changes must come exclusively from private sources rather than public revenue. All right. So they said, look, we'll pay for it. We don't even want the tax money to pay for it. We'll pay for it. Right. The vote contrasted with a 4-year trend of U.S. schools and other public buildings and institutions removing names and symbols associated with the Confederacy following protests for racial justice sparked by the murder of George Floyd by Minneapolis police in 2020. So after 2020, they said, look, we got to appease the blacks, right? So we're going to change the names of the schools. We're going to take down the statues, all that kind of stuff. But as soon as things sort of leveled out a little bit and people started focusing on other things, they said, okay, we're going to change the names back. Yeah. This is the devil. This is the devil, obviously. The dragon. All right. The vote contrasted with a 4-year... Oh, yeah, I just read that. Among more than 60 schools have abolished Confederate appellations across the country since 2020. None had reversed course until now, according to the trade publication Education Week, which has tracked the issue. Still, the issue has remained a point of contention for many political conservatives, particularly among Southern white people, who see Confederate monuments and place names as honoring the South's traditions and history. There you go. I come from the South. I know how the people down here think. They're either secretly racist or they're too dumb to realize what they're actually doing. I'm telling you straight. All right. Such was the argument posed by some local citizens who spoke at Thursday night's meeting in favor of restoring the Confederate school names. And this is something that nobody ever talks about. But if you honor the Confederacy, you're honoring losers. You're a loser. Understand that thing. They lost. They deserved to lose. They were dumb. Not all of them were bad at military strategy. Robert E. Lee fought in the U.S. Army until he seceded. Stonewall Jackson was a pretty good general, right? He was, well, that's why they called him Stonewall, because he was fearless, all right? But they were dumb. The ideas they had were dumb. They didn't realize they needed the North's industrial power, or the trade and the industrial might of the North at the time, because the world was going through an industrial revolution and the South was behind when it comes to those type of technologies. They didn't realize the mistakes that they were making. They were dumb and they were losers. All right. Is that really who you want to, is that who you really want to represent? Are the dumb losers, the dumb racist losers of the South? Come on now. So, it goes into the history of like segregation and stuff. I'm not necessarily going to get into all this. We know that the South has been messed up towards anybody who's non-white. We know this. All right. It's history. All right. And this is the history that they want to honor. All right. Here's why. Let's get to the scriptures. All right. I know we've been bouncing back and forth, but let's get to this right here. I want to get this one first in Sirach and the Apocrypha. Ecclesiasticus, aka the book of Sirach and the Apocrypha. Ecclesiasticus, let's go chapter 12. Because remember, in 2020, they changed the name. They said we don't want to catch heat from the black people of Virginia, so we're going to change the name to Mountain View and Honey Run. Not anything significant. We're just going to name it generic names, and we'll wait a few years till it dies down, and then we're going to change it back. We're going to act like we've changed, but really we've stayed the same. All right. Sirach 12 and verse 10. Never trust thine enemy, for like as iron rusteth, so is his wickedness. So understand, even You know, and it says in verse 11, I'm going to read verse 11, then I'm going to explain. Though he humble himself and go crouching, yet take good heed and beware of him. So not only is this talking about your personal enemies, this is talking about the enemies against God and against God's people. All right, we're going to read about that later. We're going to specify who these enemies are and the confederacy surrounding. All right, never trust an enemy, for like as iron rusteth, so is his wickedness. You know, because iron, you get it. I read verse 10 again. You know, iron, when you initially get it, it's shiny, it looks nice, it's useful, right? But over time, that iron reveals itself through the oxidation, and it becomes rusted. Now it's useless. Now it doesn't look so good. All right, now it's not as useful as it was before. It showed that, you know, it through time, it showed, yeah, you're not as useful as you once were. All right, you're not as shiny. You're not as good looking as you once were. You appear to be ruined. Right? Though he humble himself and go crouching, yet take good heed and beware of him. And thou shalt be unto him as if thou had wiped a looking glass. You see that right there? So like your glasses may get fogged up, right? If you got glasses, if you ever wore safety glasses, or if you wear glasses to see or to read, sometimes they get fogged up. You have to wipe it off. Now you can see clearly. Oh, now I see. That's the way your enemy is. That's the way our enemies are. All right? And thou shalt know that his rust hath not been altogether wiped away. And if you try to wipe rust off of the iron, the rust will remain. All right? That's the wickedness. That's the wickedness of our enemies. Speaking of, let's go to Psalms 83. Psalms 83. This is the enemies of God's people that I was speaking of. All right? Psalms 83, start with verse 1. Keep not thou silence, O God. Hold not thy peace, and be not still, O God. For lo, thine enemies make a tumult, and they that hate thee have lifted up the head. So Asaph here, one of the musicians that David anointed, or appointed, I should say, one of the musicians that David appointed, he said, look, God, your enemies are proud now. They think they've done something. It's time for God to make judgment and take action. All right? They have taken crafty counsel against thy people and consulted against thy hidden ones. They said, look, they turned your people into the hidden ones. They've hidden the true identity of God's people. The 12 tribes of Israel are no longer mentioned in the world. All right? They say there's lost tribes. We don't know where they went. They vanished. We don't know where they're at. They're gone. Right? That's silly. These are nations of people. These are tribes of men. Where did they go? The Bible describes what happened. Oh, the 10 tribes came over here to the west. They were the first people over here, what you call the indigenous now. And you had the southern kingdom. They went back to the land initially, but when Rome came, they fled mostly into Africa. Right? From there, you had Tyre and Zidon come together with the Palestinians, the Arabs, and they sold them to the Grecians, to the Europeans. And the Bible talks about all this. We've been through this before. All right? We've been through all that before. If you've been paying attention, if you've been studying. All right? But again, they don't call these people by their names. That's why when they came over here, they killed not only did they kill the people and take the land, but then they said, we'll kill the Indian but save the man. Let's get their kids and take them to boarding schools where they can learn our language, they can learn our culture, and they can forget their own. All right? They did the same thing to the blacks when they brought them over here on slave ships. They said, don't let them read and write. Don't let them take away their name. You're now called Toby. Forget your heritage. You can't get married anymore. You can't start families anymore. In fact, the ones that are families, we're splitting them up. That's what happened. That's history. That's how God's people became the hidden ones. All right? That's how the 12 tribes are not used as nations of people anymore. They call them something different. They call them bywords, words outside of their God-given nationality. That's a curse. Deuteronomy 28 and 37. All right, verse 4. They have said, come and let us cut them off from being a nation, that the name of Israel may be no more in remembrance. You see that right there? They said, look, we're going to scatter the 12 tribes and we're not going to call them the Israelites anymore. That was the confederacy. Verse 5. This is what I wanted to get to. For they have consulted together with one consent. They are confederate against thee. That's why they want to honor the confederacy. All right? They want to keep the confederacy in remembrance. All right? They said, look, we're always, that's the whole point of the Confederate States of America. That was their whole edict. Their whole sentiment was, we're trying to establish a nation where the basis of that nation is that we're keeping the Israelites under us. Because in America, it was worded so vaguely in the Constitution, they said that's not good enough. They said it's implied in the Constitution, but we want it actually written down and specified. That's what the whole war was about, trying to keep white supremacy alive. Where even the founding fathers who owned slaves, they said, oh, we know this ain't gonna last forever. We're gonna take advantage of it while we can, but we're gonna kick the ball down the road. Kick the can down the road. Let somebody else deal with it when it's their problem. That's what the whole war was about. All right, verse 6. And who's number 1 on the list? The tabernacles of Edom, so-called Caucasians, Europeans, whatever you want to call them, whites, right? And the Ishmaelites, right, so-called Arabs, of Moab, that's the Chinese. Those are the main ones. Those are the main ones that had this have this confederacy, all right? And it's all going to blow up in their faces, quite literally, in World War III. Because wickedness will never last forever. It can't, all right? Wicked men, when they come together, it's only for a short time period. Because eventually they're going to be wicked towards one another. The only thing that can last forever is righteousness. The only thing that can last forever is the laws of God. Because the laws of God tell you how to treat one another. Wickedness, you only go off your own feelings and your own emotions and your own stances, and I'm out for me and nobody else. It could never last forever. It will never last. All right? So even this confederacy will never last. Even though this is the one thing they can agree on, that they hate God's people, it will never last. Because they have their own strifes that they're going to flare up in the Middle East. All right? And we talked about that. We talk about that every week. The Valley of Jezreel, right? The Valley of Jehoshaphat. Armageddon. That's where it's all leading to. All right? And the Hagarenes, that's the Africans. Gebal, more Africans. And Ammon, that's the Japanese. Amalek, that's your so-called Jewish. That's Amalek. The Philistines with the inhabitants of Tyre, that's more Africans. Ashur also is joined with them, that's the Kurds. They have hope in the children of Lot, Salah. So the Kurds, got with the Asians, essentially. So that's all of them. They all came together. That's not all the nations around the world, because it leaves out the Persians, it leaves out the children of Joktan, it leaves out the Japhethites. So it's not all the nations around the world, but it is, the ones that's in power now, right? And that's what that's the main ones that's in power now. Those big three, at least, those first three are Edom, Ishmaelites, and Moab. Those are the main ones ruling the world right now. You have the so-called whites, the Saudis, and the Chinese, who are ruling everything right now. All right. So, and again, I'm speaking generally because the Bible is speaking generally here, right? So it's not like every individual person in the Middle East that you're gonna meet is gonna be an Ishmaelite. Is gonna be an evil and wicked person, right? Not every person that you meet in China is going to be a Moabite and an evil and wicked person. Not every person you meet in Europe or America that is light skinned or that is white is going to be an Edomite and an evil and wicked person, right? So it's not even about that. It's about what these nations have done. All right, understand that thing. And God gonna judge all these people for it. All right, I'm going to jump down where it said. In verse 12, this is what these nations said. Who said, let us take to ourselves the houses of God in possession, the house of Israel and the house of Judah. All right, they've enslaved these people. They've taken them into their possession. Oh my God, make them make them like a wheel as the stubble before the wind, right? So the wheel, Obviously, it keeps rolling, right? It doesn't stop. Make them like the stubble before the wind. The stubble is carried away by the wind, right? As the fire burneth a wood, and as the flame setteth the mountains on fire. He said, set them on fire, burn them up. All right, that's that nuclear fire. That's that World War III. All right, this is all prophecy. Talking about what God's going to do to these people. He's going to bring them down to the valley of Jehoshaphat. And even in Joel 3, he tells you the reason why God is making World War III happen is because of all the nations that came against the Israelites. All right. As the fire burneth the wood, and as the flame setteth the mountains on fire, so persecute them with thy tempest, with thy storm. That's why, you see the hurricanes getting worse and worse. That's why you see the, what's another, like a tsunami that happened in India in the early 2000s, and then later in Japan, I think it was the 2010s, and make them afraid with thy storm. Fill their faces with shame, that they may seek thy name, O Lord. And after all of it, after all said and done, when Christ takes his throne in the kingdom and he establishes his people in the earth, the other nations are going to come to serve the Lord. Some willingly, some unwillingly. But all will serve the Lord. That's the end result. All and everyone serving the Lord. That's what's going to happen. All right, whether they want to or not. All right, let them be confounded and troubled forever. Yea, let them be put to shame and perish, that men may know that thou, whose name alone is Jehovah, art the most high over all the earth, right? Whose name alone is He is. He is the only God. All right, He is the most high over all the earth. All men will know this. Right now, people doubt. Right now, people say, well, that God don't exist. All men will know. Everyone will bow. Everyone will confess that Jesus is Lord. Everyone. They won't have a choice. All right, understand that thing. Right now, you have a choice. You can be foolish if you want to. But you're going to have people like me, other men of God, who step up and say, look, we're trying to warn you. Get right while you still have a chance. All right, that's why I do these streams. It's not to hear myself talk. I don't like the sound of my own voice. Personally, I hear it too much. All right, but I have to warn the people of what is going to happen. All right, and I have to warn you to get right now before it's too late.